Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is WBAI 99.5 on your FM dial. Progressive radio, free speech, New York City. Hey, this is LOL, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. With us today is Jayme Kuzmarov. Professor Kuzmarov is from Covert Action Magazine. And I'm Gloria Guillo. I'm the vice chair at WBAI, and I am filling in for Craig Pasta-Jardula, who is having a family emergency. And I just want to say that the opinions that you'll hear me say today are mine. They are not WBAI, and they're not Pacifica's. Okay, let's roll.
And we're also with the Progressive Radio Network.
Yes, we're in the Progressive Radio Network. Thank you. Okay, starting today, we're going to discuss the election. It was quite an election and quite a result. And there's a lot of people doing strange stuff on the internet, especially on Twitter and TikTok. We see liberal women shaving their heads and wearing blue masks so that they can identify themselves to each other. Now, we can know who they are just by what they say. We don't need their Halloween disguises, but somehow they need to recognize themselves. So there's a lot going on. So Jayme, Professor, why did the liberals lose and Kamala Harris get so few votes? Can you explain the 2024 election?
Well, our show, Left on Left, has been providing a critique of the left from the point of view of not a Trump supporter, but somebody who's on the left. And what we've been saying time and time again is that the Democratic Party and their supporters, and liberal media who just uncritically report on them, have lost connection with American voters and have adopted some abhorrent policies. And you can see in the outcome of the election a confirmation of what we've been saying for a long time. And it's not to gloat; it's simply the reality of what's going on. That this party has veered away from its support for the New Deal. I mean, that's where the party gained support in the past and adopted progressive policies, but it's totally veered away from that. And we did an episode where we discussed Kamala Harris's close ties with Wall Street and how she was courting big money donor, associated with Mark Cuban, a billionaire, Dallas Mavericks owner, and those kind of people. And she didn't have a message that would appeal to working class voters who are suffering now from high inflation, rising costs of living, declining public services. And she did not develop a concrete plan for curbing the inflation and dealing with the economic distress facing the country. And we discussed the Democratic convention was totally superficial. You had all these celebrities like Oprah Winfrey and Michelle and Barack Obama, but their speeches were totally vapid. There were no concrete policy proposals to help regular Americans. And there was this identity politics that they've taken that too far. Yes, there was discrimination in the past. We know that. We want equal opportunity. We don't want to see perpetuation of discrimination. But the identity politics just celebrates somebody because of their ethnic background or gender, as if that makes them a good person simply because they're black or a black woman. And I think the Harris candidate was the ultimate exemplar of that. They were billing her, oh, she's a black woman, and blacks have to vote for her. But she was offering nothing for the black community, no concrete policy idea that would help that community. And she had a track record of betraying her own people as a prosecutor in California. So anybody who was well versed in her record could see that. And they could also, they lived through the Obama years where everybody celebrated how a black man was in the presidency. And yet the circumstance of black America got worse under Barack Obama. He adopted neoliberal economic policy that favored the 1%. And he gave a speech on Wall Street after his presidency and said, "You should be kissing my feet, all these wealthy bankers, because I made you so much money." So, do we really care?
There was a great article you wrote on one of the speakers at Kamala Harris's event, which who was a CIA guy. What was that again? Remind me.
Yeah, and then this is the other factor, that the Democratic Party has become the chief party of war hawks, and they've adopted this. Firstly, they've been obsessed with Russia over the last 10 years, and they've adopted this aggressive anti-Russia policy. They've revitalized the political climate of McCarthyism. They've adopted an aggressive anti-Russia policy that has resulted in a Vietnam-type disaster in Ukraine, that has resulted in the death of 500,000 Ukrainians, 500,000 Russians, has put us on the precipice of nuclear war, and is supporting the most corrupt dictatorship in Eastern Europe, that banned 12 parties, that canceled elections, that kills off his rivals, that sold his economy out to Wall Street. And they put so much political capital in this. And to answer your question, they're also, the party that supported Israel to the hilt with weapons, and that's escalating against China. And yeah, they featured at their convention Leon Panetta, the CIA director. He gave this speech, praising Ronald Reagan, and critiquing Trump for simply visiting and meeting with Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. And then, Kamala Harris echoed exactly what Panetta said and mocked Trump for supposedly exchanging love letters with Kim Jong-un. Meanwhile, it's the president's job to meet with other foreign leaders, to engage in diplomacy, and to try and solve problems and de-escalate conflicts so we're not in a world war. And they give the impression of wanting a world war and wanting to fight on all different fronts at once. And that's not a good look. The American public would prefer a government that looks after its own interests and doesn't recklessly provoke wars overseas that bring no benefits to the American public. So that's why they lost the election. And they didn't play to their own base. Harris was out there campaigning with Liz Cheney and bragging about getting the endorsement of Dick Cheney. And Democratic voters hate Dick Cheney for a good reason. And young people, who are protesting on the campuses, they see Harris as complicit in genocide, so they're not going to turn up for her, and they didn't. And that, Trump has a base of followers, and they turned out, and that's the difference in the election.
So you think it was hard for Harris to sugarcoat the fact that under her and Biden, we're on the precipice of 2 world wars that can result in nuclear catastrophes in Eurasia as well as in the Middle East. That there's just no way to hide that. And the fact that Harris and Biden are supplying weapons to the Azov battalion, which are fascists in Ukraine, there's just no way to hide that either. I mean, how do you sugarcoat that? Seriously, it's crazy. And, what's really interesting is there's a lot of Democrats out there, especially in New York, although a lot of them became Republicans. I've been looking at all kinds of maps and stuff like that. And really, the United States has become very red. And even New York and California have changed dramatically from blue to red. So, but still, when you talk to some Democrats and they're like, oh, my God, Trump's getting in. It's going to be the end of the world. Our heads are going to explode. He's going to do these terrible things, and sometimes, you say back to him, well, yeah, Trump's not a great guy. He's done a lot of bad things, but, he was president for 4 years and he didn't get us on the brink of 2 nuclear wars. Okay. He didn't get us into an inflation rate that is just off the hook and really tank the real estate market and all of these other things. And, really take a hit on the stock market. And, also all of this, people coming across the borders and stuff like that. I mean, New York City is a mess under Biden and Harris. It is just a mess with open borders and sanctuary cities. So, people are really feeling that. And there's just, I think, no way to sugarcoat it, right? Wouldn't you say, Professor?
Well, as far as the immigration issue, the Biden-Harris adopted a very strong policy at the border to ramp up military spending and surveillance technologies. And Biden actually deported 4 times more people than Trump. So I think that was political rhetoric in election time and scapegoating immigrants. That message seemed to have resonated among voters, unfortunately. But in general, I do agree with your premise that it's been a disastrous administration as far as Biden-Harris. I don't think Trump is offering alternative policy that will make things any better. In fact, his right-wing agenda will come down hard on working class people and the poor. And his strategy is to scapegoat immigrants and minority groups, which is very dangerous and reminiscent of European fascism. As far as foreign policy, well, yeah, Biden and Harris were just off the chart horrible. I mean, Trump was also horrible in his foreign policy. He did escalate the conflict in Ukraine. For instance, the Obama administration send what they said was non-lethal military aid to Ukraine. Now, really, it was lethal aid because they were sending drones for surveillance and a lot of weapons. But Trump upped the ante, and he sent Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. Biden was the Ukraine hawk. He had been pushing for that in the Obama administration, but didn't get his way with that. Trump delivered that. Trump also pulled out of treaties with Russia, including the INF Treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was considered a great treaty in the late 80s that was actually promoted and signed by the Reagan administration to de-escalate nuclear arms race for mid-range nuclear weapons. Trump pulled out of that. He ratcheted up the sanction on Russia. He also ratcheted up the U.S. military presence in Southeast Asia. He orchestrated a coup in Venezuela. He ramped up the drone war, including in Somalia. So I don't buy the idea that, and he ramped up the military spending, and he created the U.S. Space Force, which is developing basically a Nazi program to dominate the earth through military control of outer space. That was the Nazi dream, and they had brought these Nazi scientists after World War II to develop that. So I don't see Trump as progressive in any way. But yeah, Biden and Harris were just so bad that he actually looks good to a lot of people. They were just off the charts bad. Attacking Trump for one of the few reasonable things he did, which was to go to Russia and engage in diplomacy, and maybe something good would have come out of that. But instead, he was attacked in the media and attacked as a Russian agent. And the same for North Korea. And his Korea policy, which I've studied, was better than Biden's policy. Biden has supported the far right in South Korea and ramped up, U.S. military arms sales, and maybe there's a move towards stationing, more nuclear weapons in South Korea. So, Biden's much worse on that. So yeah, it's just a horror show now, and that's what voters. I mean, I think a lot of voters are under the illusion that Trump is a peace guy, but they're right in their assessment of Biden-Harris, and they have nowhere to turn in our landscape. And our show, we want to develop a real left-wing movement alternative to endless war and neoliberalism, and Trump is not that alternative. But people have nowhere to turn, and we've lived through eras of McCarthyism. And so the public and the left was destroyed in the McCarthy era in the United States, and it's never recovered. So people have nowhere to turn, so they gravitate to Trump-style anti-immigrant populism, and that's a sad reality of where we are. Now we've got to play this video. Jayme, show the video. For some reason, it's taken William Colby's grandson to say what should be said. So here's a clip from William Colby's grandson, who's poised to be in the Trump administration. Go ahead.
As successful as the first term is, the situation that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are leaving President Trump in January is, I cannot stress how dangerous it is. And he's right. I mean, the way that President Trump, again, has commendably talked about the risk of nuclear war. I worked on nuclear issues a lot. My kind of starting point a lot was like working on nuclear weapons and nuclear strategy and arms control. I worked on arms control with the Russians. We should be afraid of these things. salutary fear, not like an unmanning fear, if you will,
right?
But like a salutary fear. The beginning of wisdom is fear, or whatever the Bible says to that effect. I should know that, but
it's true.
Is true, right? Is understanding and calibrating. And to me, one of the like touch grass kind of things about a lot of the people who are calling for like no-fly zones over Ukraine and intervening against the Russians and escalating and allowing U.S. weapons to be overtly used to attack Moscow and Russian strategic, forces sites, like. That is obviously crazy. It's like time out. Like that is obviously.
But there are many Republicans.
Yeah. In fact, some of the that's why I think that the arguments within the Republican Party in some ways are fiercer, because my hope, Tucker, and I think this is something you've been on for a while, but it's like the Democrats are like they're sort of inherently out of position right now. Like where is the left? Where are the people who are like anti-war? Where are the people who say the CIA is not above reproach or the FBI is not above reproach? Who are the people, Wright Mills or whatever, the power elite and all this stuff? Those people those movements have to come back. And I think that that's something where, especially given the mandate that President Trump has won, that whatever you think of Bernie Sanders, the fact that he said like we're out of position. And others are saying they're out of position. My hope is that Democrats will go back, in a sense, to the kind of arguments that I'm making that I think you could have heard a Democrat make 10 minutes ago,
right,
or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago. Hey, we've got to be able to talk to our opponents.
Okay, great. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, why is
one of the things that Jeremy and I were talking this morning. I didn't realize I'd be on the show tonight or this afternoon, and we're talking about the left and how the left has become infiltrated, and it's become a controlled opposition and a pressure valve. And that's the CIA's main trick, is to infiltrate and control. So the left is really, it assembles these circular firing squads at each other. And, really, you get these groups such as, George Soros. And he leads these, left things, but they never really take on an anti-war stance. They don't take on what's going on in the colleges, where the Pentagon is actually doing all kinds of work in Colombia. They don't do that. They just go and focus on a very small element, which is the, what's going on with the Palestinians. So they don't really take a holistic approach and really build a wide base, because it's George Soros who's Mr. Color Revolution. And then another group that we've seen a lot of is this other guy, Singham. And there's about 5 or 6 other groups that are under him. And when there was an opportunity to bring the left and the right together for a very strong, anti-war movement, which Jeremy attended, Rage Against the War Machine, these other groups pulled out and said, well, these other people are literally too white, so we're not going to join them in an anti-war movement. They're not, not the right people to be in an anti-war movement with, which made absolutely no sense. And the other thing is these particular groups under Singham were very much in favor of mandated experimental vaccinations, which were really against the Nuremberg Code. No one should be coerced or forced to do these types of things. And usually the left is very skeptical, or is supposed to be skeptical, of government agencies. So these were very unusual positions, which really did tend to fracture the left. And then, as Jeremy was saying earlier,
that relates to what Eldridge Colby is saying. This is the grandson of CIA Director William Colby. Now, the question is, why is he saying this? He's saying that we need a new 60s movement. Where has the left been as far as anti-war? And that, the Democrats have promoting these insane policies that are threatening the risk of nuclear war, that they're wanting to take it into Russia directly, and there's no pushback. In the 60s, and he references C. Wright Mills, who wrote this book called The Power Elite, that was a major influence on the 60s movements, and the Students for Democratic Society grew on the campuses, buying into Mills's analysis about how this power elite, is elite was tied with large U.S. corporations and basically dominated the U.S. government and were adopting militaristic policies. He also wrote a book called "Listen, Yankee," criticizing U.S. Covert operations in Cuba, an effort to assassinate Fidel Castro. So now you have this grandson of a CIA director who's going to serve in the next Trump administration. He's saying, "I want to see the emergence of a new anti-war movement." Where have they been? A new '60s movement, a new movement.
Also, if you go back to the pure leadership of the '60s, and you go back to the Black Panthers, and you go back to Fred Hampton, basically Fred Hampton would work with anyone who would work with him, and so would Malcolm X. They were not exclusive. Anyone who was going to join the movement could join the movement and be part of it. It wasn't, oh no, you're not the right color to be with us and to fight with us. It's
well, that's true.
This is this is a very, very elite left. I call it the members only left.
Yeah, well, I agree with you that some of these groups on the left are not effective in trying to build a coalition and build a mass movement against war. What Mr. Colby is pointing for, and again, I find it ironic that it takes a grandson of a CIA agent who identifies as a conservative, who's saying we need this movement, and he's actually promoting a lot less hawkish policies than Biden-Harris, and he wants that to be the direction of the new Trump administration. Whether that will be the case remains to be seen, but again, it's ironic that he's saying this, and it gets to what we've been saying on the show a long time about the weakness of the left. And he was talking about the CIA, and it was the left that used to be skeptical of the CIA covert operations and the FBI, and now they go along with Russiagate, and look where it's led us. It's led us to the brink of nuclear war. So the failings of the left and the failure to hold Democratic Party politicians to account for their actions has sowed disaster for our society, and we need to regroup now and follow what Colby's saying. We need to develop, and I can only hope these movements on the campuses, like Gloria says, extend beyond just support for Palestinian rights to a larger anti-war movement that could have an impact in American society, and that will protest all Pentagon operations on their campuses, not just Israeli ones, and that will form connection with the labor movement and call for a retrenchment of U.S. empire, which is what's needed.
Well, I think we're coming up on the end of the half hour, and I'd just like to say that this is WBAI 99.5 and Progressive Radio, and WBAI New York.
We still have 3 minutes. So yeah, if you want to comment on the Colby, again, I mean, I think what he's pointing.
Well, okay. Well, we could talk. All right. So I have a little time. Can we cut that out? I guess not. It's live. Whoops, my alarm went off for this.
Okay, well, a point I want to make is that, Colby was saying there are more robust debates within the Republican politics right now about war and how do we establish a real diplomatic course where we can engage in diplomacy and address the reality, because he goes in that interview that, China and Russia, this is a new era where American power is not supreme like it once was. And the Democratic Party politicians are acting like America is still the unipolar hegemon and can go around threatening countries at will. But that's just not the case. We have the rise of BRICS. We have Russia and China forged together as a countervailing power. And American power is not what it once was. And I mean, we have to adapt to this new era. And I think those debates may be going on in Republican high-level party circles. I don't know if that's the case for the Democrats. What we saw at that convention was just stuff out of the 1980s. And that's what's really disturbing, this pro-war, Cold Warrior mentality. And that's what's very disturbing about the Democrats today. And grassroots leftists need to hold that party to its fire and develop independent movements, an independent anti-war coalition, building with Republicans who may be on the same wavelength. They might disagree on some issues, but on core issues, if they agree on the need to scale back the warfare state, I think those of us on the left have to ally with people on the right so we can be effective.
I agree. Can you tell us a little bit about his grandfather? Because he was a CIA director, and then he wasn't. He was executed. Although I guess
Yes, we
they
have a
don't
limited
exactly
amount
say
of
that.
time. Colby was the CIA director. He was the head of Operation Phoenix, which resulted in the death of at least 20,000 or more Vietnamese. And he was a hardline Cold War hawk. Although then he testified before the Church Committee, he revealed a lot of CIA abuses, and that may have led to his death. He also took on the Clintons. He was part of a group of military officers who were trying to mount a coup against Bill Clinton. They said he was totally corrupt. And then Colby turned up dead. They said that he went boating in the middle of the night. He left a half-eaten meal in his house, and everybody who knew Colby said he would never do that. He was the most meticulous man. He would never go boating in the middle of the night, and he was clearly murdered.
And he'd never leave a sandwich.
Yeah. So, and now his son seems to have more and grandson is more alert to corruption in society and supporting much more measured foreign policy, because Bill was a hardline Cold Warrior, but there are generational shifts in families, and we see that with the Colby clan.
So I guess I do my spiel here. I'm Gloria Guillo, and I've been filling in for Craig Pasta-Jardula. This is Left on Left, and we're with Jayme Kuzmarov, and we will see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Okay.
All right. That was a little sloppy at the end, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I can cut that. I'll cut that one little bit out that we had. And
for the next segment, don't mention the time, Gloria. Just if you think it's getting short, just don't mention the time.
Oh, I thought I had to do that thing. Anyway,
No,
I won't record it. I'll wait till
just keep going until the end with dialogue.
Okay.
And
I'll wait till I get to 20 seconds, and I'll do it at the 20-second mark.
Do you want to work on the closing part right now? I think normally he says, like, thank you, Jayme. This is Pasta-Jardula. You've been listening to LOL on WBAI. We'll see you next time. Something like that. You want to just rehearse that real quick before we get started again?
And don't keep mentioning BAI. You should also mention Progressive Radio, right? Progressive Radio Network.
Just say this is LOL. You've been listening to LOL.
Don't keep mentioning WBAI, because then that's not good for Progressive Radio Network.
That's okay though, but we can.
Okay.
We can. I think if you mention it once or twice, it's fine, right?
Okay. Yeah, I would keep that to a minimum. Okay, and as far as the next segment, we have this stuff on Historian now. I guess we might have some time to fill at the end. So
okay, what do we got here? Well, one of the things I'd like you to talk about, you saw the thing that I sent this morning, is there are 20 million votes found. I mean, there's 20 million more votes in 2020 than there were ever. It's like... Right. It jumps out. Do you have?
I don't know enough about that. I'd rather not discuss that because
that's a pasta topic. He's on top of that.
Yeah, I don't. I'm pure speculation on that.
Okay, so what is this? What is the next one? What's the topic
who he is? Because I think
segment 2. Okay, let me get
in the last segment you brought in this guy Singham, but nobody knows who he is. And it was a bit off topic. That we'd have to do a whole show on that. If we're going to get this guy, and he really, I mean, I believe you're onto something with him. We've got to define who he is and have some evidence that present the evidence that he is behind some of this co-optation of the left. Otherwise,
I just threw it in.
Leave him out because people won't know what that is. And
Gloria, real quick before we start, you sent an email with. Was there a link in there you wanted me to share, or
no? It just had a whole bunch of graphs.
Okay,
a bunch of photos. Did you get it?
I got the email. Oh, I see. They're all at the bottom. Are these separate photos?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it looked like it might have just been one big photo. Oh, Berlin group. Wait, is this not opening? Okay, I see what
now after we do you see this letter about the historians, Gloria?
Yeah, I didn't see the letter. I didn't have a chance.
If you have a chance, quickly just look at it. All right, now Jayme, are you going to put that up?
Yeah. What do you want to show from this? Is there anything?
See that? Just so you know, my vision is not that great.
Well, there's a line in there. There's a couple line, like there's one. They basically presented like American history was perfect until Donald Trump came along. I mean, it's this Trump derangement syndrome, and then they like just praise Harris, as if she's the greatest. Yeah, just keep the title up.
Okay.
Well, and that was a critique written on the World Socialist Network. So there's two documents there. There's the letter, and there's a critique. So maybe Gloria just asked me to describe this letter, who signed it, and then what the critique was of the World Socialist website.
Okay.
Who signed
bring
it? Wait,
those up.
describe who signed it, and what was the other one?
And then what was the critique on the World Socialist website?
Okay. All right, Gloria, do you want to do a practice wrap, a practice rehearsal of the closer before we get started?
Okay. Thank you. You've been listening to LOL, where the left. Well, I don't know. It's on the other side now. Thank you. You've been listening to LOL, Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo. I'm filling in for Craig Pasta-Jardula. We've had Jayme Kuzmarov. Thank you so much. Hope we see you next time. Next time or next week or what?
Next time. Next time.
Okay.
And also, you got to do the intro again this time because it's another episode. So
okay.
If these, I don't know if these run back to back. So I think they
do on Progressive Radio Network.
They do run them back to back.
Yes.
Okay. So don't say anything about 99.5. Just say welcome. No. This is LOL.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought I was supposed to do that.
You could say WBAI and Progressive Radio, or Pacifica Radio.
Progressive Radio Network.
Yeah. And
now, Gloria, once we're done, if we have some free time after the historian, maybe bring up the dismal performance of Jill Stein and the Green Party.
Yeah, we could talk about that afterwards. We can go as long as you guys want to.
No, I have stuff to do. I don't want to stay on that much longer.
I didn't even look at it. I didn't care, to be honest.
But if we have some free time, if you want to bring up how bad the third parties are, that is a factor in Trump's election, I think.
Okay.
Because there's no opposition to him.
Well, these 24 minutes usually go by pretty quick. So
okay. But I mean, we'll cover the historians in about 15 minutes. We might have about 10 minutes. So you can bring up I don't know, unless there's something else you'd want to bring up in the last 5 to 10 minutes. Why don't you bring up
you guys? It's up to you guys.
I'd kind of like to do more on that Singham stuff, but I don't really have enough. So I think you're right.
Well, yeah, you have to have the goods. Otherwise, yeah. All right, so let's just bring up the weak performance of third parties, because our show wants to advocate for a third party, but an effective one. If these third parties are so terrible, then they're not serving anybody's cause.
All right.
Okay.
Are we ready to go? Are we ready to go again? Just Gloria, give me the signal when you're ready to start, so I know to hit the button on the clock.
Okay. Welcome. You're watching LOL and listening to LOL, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. We're on WBAI and Progressive Radio Network. I'm Gloria Guillo, Vice Chair of WBAI and a member of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, and I'm filling in for Craig Pasta-Jardula, who has taken off for a family emergency. We're saying, prayers for his family, and hope he returns very soon. Tonight we have with us Jayme Kuzmarov, who is a professor at Tulsa University and also the managing editor of Covert Action magazine. And today we're going to be talking about, on our segment, the American liberal historians disgrace themselves with vacuous letters supporting Kamala Harris. So let's talk about what's going on with these historians and why they are disgracing themselves.
Okay. Well, and I teach at Tulsa Community College. This letter, a week or so before the election, American historians put out a letter supporting Kamala Harris. And this letter was signed by some top liberal historians who often write for highbrow liberal publications, or whether the New York Times Magazine, those kind of publications. Sean Willens was one of the signers. Beverly Gage, who's a professor at Yale University and wrote a book about J. Edgar Hoover, biography of him. The Nation would be another publication some of them write for. This letter,
So these are all Ivy League guys for the most part.
and the letter, they said, oh, we have to support Kamala Harris, and they sent it, and they got the signatures from hundreds of academic historians who teach at a lot of top universities. Now, what was disturbing about the letter was they presented this Trump derangement syndrome, because they basically suggested, and ironically, some had written books or article, and one of the signatory was Eric Foner, who's a very distinguished liberal historian who's written critically about slavery, and he wrote a book on Abraham Lincoln. He's written critically about the Reconstruction period in American history, and he's very respected for good reason as a historian. But this letter suggested that American history was great and perfect until Donald Trump came along. It was like ahistorical, exaggeration. And then they went on to just praise Kamala Harris, that she's done great things throughout her life and she's this exemplary leader. So, I mean, there are two fundamental problems with this letter. A, the view of American history that, everything was great until Donald Trump came along. Well, that is not true. And these historians know better. They've written about slavery and all the horrible thing that went on, horrible injustices in American history, and corrupt leaders. I mean, Trump is not the first leader who's done bad things in office or who's a crude, vulgar guy. I mean, Lyndon Johnson, if you look into his background, Lyndon Johnson was a very crude guy. And I did an article. He cheated in 1948 Senate elections. He rigged and stole the election. And then there's strong evidence that he carried out murders in Texas to cover up his election fraud. And people in Texas saw him as a bully. He's probably behind the Kennedy assassination, and he orchestrated the Vietnam War. And he was even more vulgar and crude than Trump. I can't say the things he did on live radio. He even whipped out his private part in front of people and did things like that. So Trump, these historians.
Jeremy, just taking a step back, why are all of these people able? Why do they have this position? Why are they, given this springboard to represent it? Where's the counter positions in these universities? What happened to the professors such as yourself, who are historians, who used to be at these prestigious universities and have now kind of been accessed? I know at least two that are friends of ours, in addition to you, who have been accessed because of their position on Gaza and support of Palestinians.
Yeah, let me answer that. That's an excellent question. And first, I want to say, that this letter presented a stark dichotomy. I don't personally have a problem. Our show, we're on the left. We don't like Trump. A critique of Trump is fine. There's strong ground to criticize him. But this letter distorted American history, and it made like dark versus light. Trump is this horrible person, horrible guy who will ruin American democracy, and Harris is this bright light. Well, what we know about Harris is that's totally not true. As a prosecutor, she had very harsh. She was a harsh prosecutor, and she was involved. There have been articles that looked into her, and that she kept a lot of people in jail who didn't deserve to be in jail. And she protected Sirhan. Robert Kennedy was the case I looked into was the Kennedy assassination, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was trying to free Sirhan, and she made sure, because there's very strong evidence that he was set up as a patsy, and he'd been jailed all these years. But when she was in California, she made sure to keep him in jail. So that's a sign that there's something corrupt about her. And I don't know all the detail, but there are deep exposés by investigative journalists and legal experts who found that Harris's record was terrible as a prosecutor in many ways, keeping innocent in jail, harshness. I think she went after like truancy, kids who were truant from school, and she wanted to punish their parents. She was a very harsh prosecutor. And then look at her record. I mean, she had no record at all in the Senate, did nothing to distinguish herself. And then as vice president, she supported, they call her Holocaust Harris. She supported the genocide in Gaza. She's been a super hawk on Ukraine. She went to Philippines. I did an article about she traveled to the Philippines to shore up a U.S. A base deal so the U.S. could get more military bases in the Philippines. And these are, designed to encircle China and provoke China into war. And it's ramping up U.S. militarism in Southeast Asia. And these bases also have terrible environmental effects. They take over the best land, and they spread major environmental problems. So why is she heralded as a progressive when she's an arch imperialist associated with the war policies of the Biden administration? And I mean, she was courting Wall Street, and she backtracked on any progressive measures, as we discussed on this show, like Medicaid and banning fracking or taking a stand against fracking because of its environmental costs, seeking to regulate the industry better. She totally backtracked on that. Now, Bernie Sanders said that was pragmatic, but many of our viewers would think otherwise. We want a principled liberal, to run for election. And clearly she was not that person. That's why she lost a lot of votes. She failed in the election. So why are these historians? They're supposed to be objective analysts of American life. They're creating this false good versus evil dichotomy in an election. They're totally sugarcoating and misrepresenting the American past. And they're making like Trump is the only bad leader in American history. And you can look at Bill Clinton. A lot of Democratic leaders were vulgar like him. And Clinton was a horrific womanizer, and there's evidence that Clinton was a rapist. So to think Trump is uniquely vulgar, it's ahistorical, and these are historians. And then now to answer your question, these kind of people have taken over the academy, which has turned into an organ of the centrist wing or corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And they're all into identity politics. And there are a million courses now, and all the job listing, because I was on the academic job market for years. And every year I looked, there were 50 jobs, for African-American history. Now, I'm glad that African-American history is being taught, but it shouldn't be taught at the expense of certain traditional history, diplomatic history, and political history. And there's this agenda of identity politics. They're not teaching class history, the history of class struggle in the United States, of working class movements to transform capitalism, of the history of the Socialist Party. Those courses are not being offered. They're not offering courses on the history of American imperialism, especially in a more contemporary period. And those fields, and they've cut a lot of the jobs, so there are very few jobs. And those who get the jobs, including the Ivy League schools, are those who promote a conservative, pro-U.S. foreign policy, anti-Russia bias. And then there have been a lot of purging of academics, like you described. People have lost their jobs who are critical of U.S. foreign policy, whether it's in the Middle East and whether it's towards Russia. And the people who sign that letter, they're gatekeepers. They control the narrative, and they steer people toward the Democratic Party, and they politicize the academy. And I have to agree with conservatives who say that they have no place in the academy, that they face discrimination, because they do. The academy is supposed to be a free exchange of ideas with all kinds of viewpoints represented, not just pro-Obama Democrats and these pro-war Democrats, and they distort history. They're supposed to be historian, but they distort it. And the names are on that letter. And people don't respect them anymore. They've lost credibility, and young people are not. History is the highest declining majors because they don't want to be indoctrinated with Democratic Party talking points. That's not why you go to college to study history, but that's what you get with a Sean Wilentz and these kind of people who sign that letter.
Well, the thing that I think you really want to kind of explain a little bit about is that, this concept of identity politics versus economic theory. And, when you're studying class analysis or economic theory, you're looking at ways to unite people and to bring them together, and people with disparate views and positions, but are united because they are all in the oppressed class. Whereas when you're dealing with identity politics, you get into this kind of pecking order as to who is the most oppressed. And it's extraordinarily divisive. And whenever we hear something that's extremely divisive, we think of the CIA. Because, even going back to the Roman Empire, you divide and conquer. And if you have, an elite or a predator class, they're very small. So what they don't want is a united working class, a group of people that can all agree to, on certain principles. So this focus on identity is this sectionalization. So you have women against men, you have men against women, you have children against parents, you have the elderly against no longer in extended families. You now have nuclear families, and now you don't even have nuclear families. So, the more you break up society and the more you break up people by, race, religion, and now the big one is really breaking people into the blue and red sports. And, so you have these Democrats hating the Republicans, and the Republicans really actually not so much hating the Democrats. It's really the real anger comes from the Democrats to the Republicans. They're, they're really freaking out. So I think these are CIA ops, in my opinion, because they are making these fractions. And I think this is also your position too, Jeremy. Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment, and it's very likely. I don't have the proof, but it would make sense based on the larger strategy of trying to divide the population and channel. Identity politics is very divisive. I think what the ruling class fears is what Martin Luther King was building, an interracial coalition of the middle and working class people and students into a broad social movement that would push for more social democratic policies and more anti-war, humane foreign policies. And that's really what they don't want. So they've taken over all kinds of institutions, including, I think we have to look at higher education, that it has a huge impact on young people, that it helps to shape their worldview, and that these elites don't want students learning about class struggle in America. They don't want students learning about the horrors of U.S. foreign policy. They want to divide them in that way and push them into this identity politics thinking, and to support only black lives matter, but not a broader movement of black and all and others coming together along class lines. So I think you have a good analysis. And I think more people are becoming conscious of this. I think this Harris letter, there was a big backlash against it. And I think a lot of people who signed the letter looked pretty bad because it was such a distorted letter. And it showed the real bias, and that they're not doing also their job as historians, which is to try and be objective and criticize all sides in politics. I think there is strong ground to criticize and fear Trump, but if you're just going to sugarcoat the Democratic Party, you lose credibility, because they've done a lot of terrible things, and Harris was clearly not the ideal candidate. So to make her like you lose your credibility, and the job of historian is to try and be objective. And I think the profession has taken a hit from this, and I hope
And I think you should plug two of your books here. Jeffrey,
I've written
two books, one on Clinton and one on Obama. Please hold
Yeah, and this is not in vogue. These scholars who get the top job at the Columbia, because if you look at the sign of that letter, there are a lot of them at elite universities, Columbia or Harvard or Princeton, and they're just writing critically on Republicans. And there's a whole vogue, in the profession to have all these books criticizing the right wing and Republicans. And yeah, it would make sense as part of the strategy of divide and conquer, to make these middle class students who are being groomed to be the elites of society or professional class of society, make them hate the Republican instead of and kind of sneer at a Trump supporter, instead of when we need to build a coalition, as you say. So, but yeah, my books have not.
Well, you have two books. What's you have the Clinton
Well,
book
I wrote
And the
two
Obama book.
studies. Yeah, Obama's Unending War, Fronting the Foreign Policy of the Permanent Warfare State, and Warmonger, How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Set the Groundwork for Bush and Biden. And these books have not been they've been ignored in the academy. I had a teaching position and I was railroaded from that. I applied to hundreds of jobs. I never got any. The books were ignored in academic journals, or I faced McCarthy type attacks where they didn't engage with the content of the book. They just smeared me. And it's not a professional quality review. So that's my experience. The people were kind of nasty, and these are supposed to be people you respect. What's happening in higher education is similar in the media. That's got a little more attention. How people who do exposés are smeared and blacklisted, who are doing real investigative journalism, and they have to survive on the margins. They can only find they can barely find employment. They may be able to work for alternative media, although a lot of those may be infiltrated as well. So certain topics are totally taboo. So I think what's happening in journalism, the journalistic profession, is happening in higher education as well. And I think we need movements to combat that and to develop independent institution and to reward scholars and journalists who do real independent investigative work and present critical analysis. And that's what students are looking for today, because they see that a lot is wrong with society, and they're looking for role models who have integrity. And these historians are no role models because they have no integrity.
Well, just a quick story about my undergraduate work. I went to SUNY Westbury, and they had a program called Economics, Society, and Politics. And it was a whole wing, basically. And in it, we did critical analysis and we studied everything. And it was encouraged. And I went back maybe, about 4 or 5 years ago to the college just to, for one of the reunions. And that was completely disbanded. And really now all SUNY Westbury has are programs for a particular specialty. Like you want to become an accountant, you want to become a nurse, you want to become, a business person, whatever, but they're very, very specific. So what's also happening is this whole concept of critical analysis and debate and thinking and all of that stuff is really not taught in our public universities anymore. What's taught is how do you get a job specifically, and don't think about anything else. Just think about that particular path. And I think that's really having an effect also on the opportunities for professors such as yourself to get jobs, and also for students to actually come out with the ability to ask questions. And one of the most important things is for students to be able to question authority and to ask why and how. And that is not encouraged. And matter of fact, anytime we do ask those things, we're told we are conspiracy theorists, and those things are, considered, in the mainstream media to be negative traits and not, inquisition and natural qualities that should be encouraged and respected. So I think that's another issue we have.
Well, if I can make several points, point one is I agree with you that the university has become totally corporatized and militarized, and that's why we're seeing this shift. Even in the past, there were a lot of critical, independent historians. The Wisconsin school was notorious for providing critical analysis of U.S. imperialism, and was led by William Appleman Williams, who was a great historian at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who wrote critical books on U.S.-Russian relations and U.S. foreign policy. But those kind of people were purged over time, and some had good careers and they aged out. And the younger people who tried to follow their model, like myself, were purged. And that's part of this corporatization and militarization and channeling people away from the liberal arts into these, supposedly practical, career-oriented programs. And you have to look at the funding of the universities, how they get funded, how they rely on these billionaire donors. And we've seen that very clearly with these the protests over the Israel-Palestine. You have these billionaire donors trying to dictate how the university handles student dissidents. And one of the sad things those protests, because I was at UCLA, was that they were trying to promote just a study group on the Israel-Palestine conflict, because they told the local newspaper they had no courses that critically analyzed the Israeli-Palestine conflict. So that gets to the heart of what you're saying. Students are not, being taught to think independently, and they're not good courses anymore. They purged a lot of the critical faculty, so they're not getting professors where they can really try and critically understand what's gone wrong in Israel-Palestine. And the issue of conspiracy theory, I think both of us have been attacked as that. It's just a way to silence debate. And it's like the new McCarthyism. You don't call somebody a communist, you call them a conspiracy theorist, and that shuts out and dissuades younger people from investigating important controversies in American history and the recent American past. And as a historian, I know conspiracies happen repeatedly throughout history, and what the public is told is often far from the reality. If you study World War I or that period, you know that, but we're not supposed to think that way in the present when we know that that's always happened before. But that's just a way to silence people. And in higher education, you can't talk about a lot of topics today. You can't investigate. You will never get a job. You'll be thrown out if you raise questions or do investigation to things like 9/11 or false flag operations and American wars. Forget it. You'll be pilloried and thrown out immediately.
As like a slight aside, we don't have much time. I'd done a lot of research on the Milgram experiment and on authority and all of that. And one of the things that was found out was resistance was better when people really had the ability to debate and dialogue. You really do build, debate really builds creative thinking and independent thought. And if you X out debate and you make everything the same opinion, then in the same narrative, what you really have happen is this dumbing down of people's ability to think.
We're out of time, but that seems to be the design.
All right, well,
population and keep the hold of the oligarchy in power.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. This has been LOL and Jayme Kuzmarov, and I'm Gloria Guillo. I'm filling in for Craig Pastajardula, and we really enjoyed being here today, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Is it over, Jayme? All right, well, that was good. Is Jayme there?
I think you might have been a couple seconds short, but
geez. It's hard to hit it on the nose.
Said goodbye. I saw goodbye in the
I know.
Yeah. Well, I thought I was just like wrapping.
Well, that doesn't matter. If it ends, then the station will just have a blank for a few seconds.
Yeah, well, I can stretch it out. It's easier if you go over than it is if you go under.
Okay.
Well, I saw goodbye, so I like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
To wrap it up,
I was
early
with that. I was about 10 seconds early with that.
Okay. Well, a few seconds.
We're learning.
But I think it was a good show. You did well, Gloria.
I tried.
You did well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you did this on the fly. You didn't know you were going to be doing this today.
I knew about it 20 minutes before it happened.
I think we had a pretty good discussion about academia. So
yeah, that's good.
Did you want to talk real quick about like what you saw with the conservatives and the votes? Since we have an audience,
you can mention. I have to leave because I got some other stuff to do. So if you want to continue with him, Gloria, you can.
Yeah, I mean, if you just
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. I'm confused.
I'm going to sign off. So Jayme, you're okay with the show?
Yeah, I can work with what we got there. So.
Okay. So you'll send it to them tomorrow morning?
I will. Yeah, I'll work on it tonight, cut it up, and we'll get it out there.
Okay, I appreciate that. And thank you, Gloria. Yeah, you did a nice job.
I tried. I'm a little sick. I'm a little fuzzy-headed.
Yeah, well, you did well. I think they were
you.
both good. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Jayme.
I got to sign off, so yeah.
So wait, so I'm not sure. So are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live. Why don't you just talk about this real quick and then you can sign off. You can take like 5-10 minutes because you were really interested about this before we went live. So, just say what, give a few of your thoughts on it, because I think this is an interesting subject too. Noting that like Harris came in 20 million votes shy of where Biden was, and so she's more in line where Hillary Clinton and Obama were, and then Biden has this weird spike. So you're a little bit more on top of this than I am. So
well, not really so much, but so I'm still live as we go on. Okay, well, I came across this really interesting graph. I don't know if you can pull up that graph. Yeah, this is a great graph. Well, basically what it's showing is that for the Democrats, they really are kind of clustered around 60 million votes. And that's really like the trend line. If you do stock trading and economics, it's the trend line is really around there. And then you see this really unusual situation in 2020 where the Democrats got like really like over 20 million extra votes. And that was also at the time where you had the COVID lockdowns, and you began this process of allowing early voting and mail-in ballots. And there was a lot of challenging information coming out with these ballots, because one of the things that we always discuss, and I feel like I'm channeling Craig Pasta-Jardula here. We're both integrity, voting integrity people, and this is one of his, big ones, is the chain of custody. And voting is nothing without chain of custody. The important thing is knowing, what happened at each stage, and that each stage was monitored, and that each stage was protected. And if you don't know where these votes came from or who cast them and how they arrived, if they're like in these bushels in the back of a van, and they're just being delivered, and then now they're being counted, it's highly questionable. So, with these 20 million votes, that really pushed, Biden into the presidency. And really for the last 4 years, no one's been allowed to even question this, or you were considered taking over the country and, destroying the whole country. So no one's really allowed to even say this stuff. But now we're allowed to start talking about it again. And it's like, well, where did these 20 million votes come from? And then the other thing is, where did they go? It was like a poof. It's like, I was calling it the Houdini. Like all of a sudden you had 20 million votes, and then all of a sudden you don't. It's this poof. So it really makes it extremely unusual. The other thing that I always thought was very unusual is, no matter what you say about Trump, or anyone says about Trump, or whatever, I independently think about Trump, he does energize his base, and he does get a good turnout. And Biden barely campaigned and barely did anything. And when he did, he had very poor attendance. And he couldn't energize anyone. I mean, he was referred to as Sleepy Joe. Now, of course, he's Genocide Joe, but before he was Sleepy Joe. So you're saying, well, wait, so Sleepy Joe got, 20 more million than Democrats normally get, and beat out Trump. So, there is some investigation to be done. And I hope that we can actually get to the root of this now that this won't be blocked, because, whether or not you like Trump or don't like Trump, or you like Biden or don't like Biden, 20 million votes is a lot of votes. And one of the things that kept popping up was that that Harris won in the states in particular that had no IDs. Now, I haven't personally, validated everything on this chart. It looks about right, but I haven't tested it. But you do see that there's another chart, Jayme, if you want to pull that one up, what kind of goes next to it. Yeah, so if you kind of look at this chart, you could see how the country has gone from blue to red. And, in my opinion, a lot of that is due to war in Eurasia and war in the Middle East, and people not wanting that. And I think there's just no way you can sweep that under the rug. And anyone who comes along, even if Trump has a bad record, also anyone that comes along, and Trump has come along and said it, that is seeking to end these two conflicts is going to get votes. And that seems to be what happens. So if you look at this and then you see the blue, and then you look at the next one, Jayme, if you would pull that one back up again, the other one that we saw that had the, it does kind of line up, not quite exactly, but it does quite kind of line up where you could see where Harris came in and where Trump came in, and there weren't voting IDs. Now, I've done election integrity in several other developing countries and written articles on them in Venezuela and in Nicaragua, and they require, also Brazil, and they all require federal voting IDs. They're not even local IDs or state IDs, but they're federal IDs. And in other countries, they also do fingerprinting and things like that. So they really do know who's voting. In the United States, you have states that do not take IDs, and in New York State, for one, which was my state, I don't have to show an ID. I just have to say I'm me, and I sign, and my signature is supposed to look like my signature, and that's it. I'm allowed to vote. So it's really quite strange. And it's particularly unnerving when we have countries like the United States criticizing countries like Venezuela, Brazil, and Nicaragua for voting when they have much superior systems than we have in the United States. They have much more checks and balances. They have real-time audits. As I said, fingerprinting, chain of custody. They have backup ballots, paper ballots to back up the electronic ballots. They have all kinds of paper tallies, multiple paper tallies that are given in and paper tallies that are posted outside the voting areas where people could see in real time what's going on. So it's really quite interesting how the United States just coincidentally doesn't have a very tight system, and has the other big thing that we all go crazy for is for voting integrity is in Brazil, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, they don't have voting machines, especially the ones that are electronic, hooked up to the internet, and they don't have proprietary secret software. So really, in the United States, we are running proprietary secret software on machines that are hooked up to the internet, and we're going to say that everything's cool, don't worry. So we all have some questions here. Anyway, that's all I got for you, Jayme, today.
That was great. That was great. Yeah, that was great. That was exactly the kind of thing we need. So if you just want to wrap it up, and then
okay, well,
get out of here.
Yeah, thank you again for having me on the show, and we have Jayme CheeseSlice that's been helping us through this, and our love and thanks and appreciation to Jayme, and we're saying some prayers for Pasta's family in this very difficult time, and we're hoping that everything, say your prayers for our beloved Pasta, and hopefully everything will turn out real well. And thank you for listening. Peace out.